Hi there, Sandy here. Welcome to another polymer clay tutorial at keepsakecrafts.net. Just about everybody who's ever tried polymer clay has at one point jumped in and tried the very cool technique called Mokume Gane. Today I decided it was high time I put up a Mokume Gane video. So Mokume Gane is actually a technique that polymer clayers took from Japanese sword making, where they would layer metals and compress them and deform them and end up with these beautiful shapes and striations in the metal. The way it's done in polymer clay is kind of similar. Now, I've seen a lot of Mokume Gane tutorials and a lot of examples of it, and I have to say, maybe I'm a snob, but I don't like it all. I think the colors really have to be chosen carefully or it just doesn't look nice. One thing you need is a fair amount of contrast, and you need colors that look good in proximity to each other. So what I did, I went to my Color Inspirations Pinterest board and chose this kind of southwestern looking color scheme. And you can see here I've mixed up 6 clays, the red and the orange and the turquoise, the dark gray, which was far more purple when I looked at it more closely, and the medium gray, and then for the lighter gray I'm going to use silver leaf on some translucent clay. So I've conditioned and rolled out pieces of clay in these different colors, and I just need to put the silver leaf on the translucent. I really love adding translucent clay to a Mokume Gane mix because it gives it a very interesting depth. I already did an example of this and I felt like there wasn't enough silver in it. So I'm going to roll this out a little bit thinner in my pasta machine. And by rolling the clay out thinner before I put the silver leaf on, I'll end up having more silver leaf in my project. So I'm just going to do that. And burnish it on a little. There we go. And if there's a little around on the edges, I'll just wrap it around the back. This is not a technique requiring precision. So right now I'm planning how I'm going to layer these, and I want to do it with contrast. So I'm going to put lights next to darks. So I've got this turquoise, I'm going to put it next to this gray purple. This kind of peachy, corally orange, I think I'll put it next to the silver. So I think I'll have the red next to the silver. So I'm going to roll this through on the thinner thickness as well. So good. So that'll be pretty with the red and the silver. So then with these ones, I'm just going to do the layering, and I'm not even cleaning up the edges yet. I don't think you need to quite yet, as long as your pieces are roughly the same size. So I'm going to roll these through the pasta machine on the thickest setting. And since there's a double thickness here, they will end up being twice as long. Once you have your pieces rolled out, you have your pairs melded together, then again you can decide which ones are going to be next to which. I think I'm going to have the silver and the translucent next to the turquoise. I think I'm going to put the red and the peach together. Cut the stack in half, and then layer them on top of each other. And now I'm going to roll this whole stack through the pasta machine. I meant to do that before I cut them in half, but that's okay, because then I would just cut it in half and stack them again, so it's not a big deal. Roll them to just kind of meld them together, and then I think I'll cut this into 3 pieces. And that's kind of interesting with all those ragged edges, so I'm going to put those in the middle because I can. And put this one on top. And then what I like to do is take an acrylic block, this one has square edges, and I'm going to kind of start compressing in these ragged edges. I just feel like you get a lot of interest in the edges if you don't trim it all nice and neat, and then you don't waste clay either. So after looking at this, I decided that maybe my layers were a little thick, and I probably should have run my sheets through the pasta machine maybe one more time, doubled together. But it's easy enough to remedy that. I'm just going to use my roller and roll this out till it's about twice as big as it was. And that will flatten my sheets by half. So it's always just a good idea to do some experimenting and see what effects you like, what looks appeal to you. There, I think that'll be better. So now I'm going to cut this in half and stack the two halves together. And now I have a bunch of nice thin layers. And once again, I'm going to go back and just kind of square up these edges. And now at this point, you can really do whatever you want. Make any kind of pattern you like in the clay. But I saw something that I thought looked really cool, and I've experimented with it and really like the finished effects in clay, and that is to have nesting shapes and then take your straight blade and make radial lines. And so I'm going to do that. I'm going to start in one corner and just use my nesting set of oval cutters. And just cut all the way down to the tile with each one. And you could tilt them one way or the other. You could make overlapping ones. I could do this and this. But I think in this case, I really like that look of the concentric rings. You could do this with a round. You could do it with any shape, really. I certainly hope that you enjoy these tutorials that I make for you. So many of you just leave the nicest remarks in my comments on this YouTube channel, and I can't tell you how much I appreciate that. It's so good to know that it's helping you and benefiting you. And if you're interested at all in helping out in return, I would love it if you'd consider supporting me on Patreon with, $1 a month or whatever you can afford. It really helps me to be able to buy clay and tools and supplies in order to continue to be able to make these videos for you. And in return, from my patrons, they get to participate in drawings for some of my clay and jewelry pieces, and they get a special patron-only feed with behind the scenes and such. So there, that's kind of a cool pattern, I think. And then these spaces out here that don't have much going on, I'm just going to take a little tiny ball tool and make some holes, and I'm going to push this down as far as I can get it. And I really like the way these look in the finished Mokume Gane. In the upper layers, they're just kind of empty holes, and when you put it over a background, they show up. And sometimes the pieces will come apart, and that's okay, because we've cut them apart, and that's all right. I'm just going to squidge them back together a little bit. And you could make, you could keep going, but I think I'm going to stop right there. Now at this point, you don't want to try to lift the clay off the tile. The fact that it is stuck to the tile really works in our benefit. And now, the exciting part, we're going to start slicing into this and see what we've got. What you need is a flexible clay blade. This blade is just a little bit flexible, but it's fairly rigid. But you want one like this that's very flexible. They're very sharp when they're this thin. And also this will help you to take nice thin slivers off your clay. So I'm just going to try to cut a very, very thin amount off the clay. Ooh, isn't that cool? And what I have over here is just a piece of kind of a silvery black clay that I rolled out on a fairly thin setting on the pasta machine already. And I'm going to use that to put these pieces down so they don't get wasted. And I picked a color that will look good shining through. Like here's those holes. So that black clay is going to show through behind them. And so you can just keep shaving. Of course, the thinner you're able to make your slices, the more you will get out of your block of Mokume Gane. And although this doesn't look like a ton of clay, if you treat it well and carefully, you'll get a fair amount of surface decoration out of it. Now I think that's just really cool. Ooh, I like that. So you just keep doing that. And then you can use this sheet that we're making over here to decorate anything you want. So just these little scraps even. See, I love the way those dots look. I just think they're very cool. And because I'm doing this for the camera, I'm being kind of quick, but if I was doing this in my studio time, I would take a bit more care and really make the most of every single one of these slices. Using this technique of putting it on a piece of scrap clay, you can see that you can get quite a bit of surface covered with just a smallish block of Mokume Gane. And I'm going to run this through the pasta machine to smooth everything out. And I'll just show you by point of comparison. Here's some Mokume Gane I made earlier. I did this with half as much silver leaf, and you can see, you do see quite a bit more silver in here. And I think my layers were thicker in this one. I did that extra rolling out to make these thinner. And so you can see the difference in the pattern. One good reason to make it thinner was that if you want to make your sheets nice and smooth by running them through the pasta machine, when you do that, as you roll it through, they're going to get bigger. Now if you have a pattern you don't want to distort, what you need to do is roll it through on one setting, say a 3 on the pasta machine, in one direction, give it a quarter turn, and then roll it through in that direction on the 4, the next setting down. And that will help offset the distortion that you'll get. I mean, with a pattern like this, it's not a huge deal. So you can cut slices and use it for all sorts of things, but let me show you some things that I made with this. Here are a few pieces that I made using this particular Sculpey cabochon mold. And I made donuts and teardrops and round bezel pieces. And I think this one came out particularly beautiful. This one has been very lightly sanded. Remember, you have a very thin veneer of your pattern, so you don't want to do any aggressive sanding. But very lightly sanded, and then I applied, I think, probably half a dozen coats, nice thin coats of Sculpey gloss, sanding between the coats to get this really beautiful shine. And you see the sparkle of the silver clay, a few little specks of silver leaf, and some of the effects of the translucent. So let me show you how I made these. You just need your bezel mold and your sheet of clay, and then just some scrap clay. I just need to find a cutter that's going to be slightly bigger than my shape, so that'll do. And then I'll use my cutter to choose a part of the clay that I like, that I think will look nice. That's kind of interesting. Use your stiff blade so that you don't wreck anything. And then you just place that in the mold. And then I'm going to take some of my scrap clay, roll a nice ball, make sure it's nice and conditioned, and then I'm just going to press that in. And I can see this edge slid down a little bit more. Because it's a silicone mold, you should be able to just kind of turn it, pop that out, and then put it back in, centered a little better. That's why you want your cutter to be a little bit bigger than the bezel mold, because it's going to be round and come up the edges, so it needs a little bit more. So I think I need some more scrap clay here. Go ahead and overfill it with scrap clay. I'm going to just push, and as I push that down, that pushes that out to the edges, and just really push in nice and firmly. I'm going to take the thin blade because it's sharper, and just hold it level to the top of the mold and trim off the excess. And that's all there is to that. And you do your teardrops the same way, and you can just roughly cut out a piece to fit in there and then trim it afterwards if you don't have cutters that are the right shape. Now the donuts are a little bit trickier. I'll show you those. So with the donut, I'm actually going to cut out the hole in the middle. It's smaller than the hole is, but just use one of these little, I think they're 3/16 inch Kemper cutters to cut that out. And then what you want to do is take your scrap clay, here's some, and roll it into a snake. And then join the ends of the snake so it's approximately the size and shape of your mold. And then go ahead and push that in. And then I would just go ahead and bake these right in the mold. I mean, you can take them out, but you know, so that works. But it's just, if you want a nice, perfect shape, you should just leave it in the mold and bake it. You can also just cut a slab. I just cut a slab of my Mokume Gane from this piece. It uses a lot more of your piece, but I thought it was kind of interesting. I don't know that I love the gloss on this, but you can cut this into different and interesting shapes. If you love sanding and buffing, then this one, where it's not a thin veneer, but it goes all the way through, you could sand and buff and really bring out the shine and the translucent layers. So I hope that's given you some ideas for how you can make and use Mokume Gane in your crafts. I showed you how to use this Sculpey cabochon mold, and they also have a corresponding bezel mold. And I will be doing some playing with putting these pieces in the bezel mold, and I'll have a video for you on that soon. So if you're interested in any of the supplies that I used here, click on the little eye or the tag in the upper right of the video, or the link in the description box. That will bring you to my blog post, where with every blog post on a project, I always have a complete supply list and links to some of these products. Be sure to subscribe if you haven't already, and take a look at my Patreon page to see how you can get great rewards and help support these tutorials. Happy creating. Bye-bye.